Welcome, everybody. We are so pleased that you can join us today. My name is David Uwe, Executive Director of the Chinese American Museum in Washington, D.C. We're the only museum in our nation's capital dedicated to the Chinese American story. This is the first in our new event series, Women Entrepreneurs, sponsored by Mei Xu and James Xu of Evergreen Enterprises. Today, we are fortunate to host a conversation with Mei Xu, founder and CEO of YesSheMay.com, a legendary businesswoman, founder of Chesapeake Bay Candle and Bliss Living Home. And since building her brands into international household names, Mei has dedicated her time to a new mission of mentoring and extending resources to women-owned businesses and early venture entrepreneurs. We are also excited to welcome the talented Bay Fang to this conversation. Bay was until recently, president of Radio Free Asia, where she oversaw award-winning journalism with the mission of bringing free press to various parts of Asia. She was a former Beijing bureau chief for US News and World Report. She also covered wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. She served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, and she earned her undergraduate degree at Harvard and was a visiting fellow at Oxford and a Fulbright scholar in Hong Kong. Most bios could stop right there, but she was also a trained French chef at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris and holds a brown belt in Kung Fu. So I think you'll enjoy this conversation between two such accomplished people. But just a quick housekeeping note, during this event, all attendees could submit questions through the chat or Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. And we'll do our best to answer your questions as time allows. So, but if you'd like to see the panelists at the same time, we suggest that you switch to what they call in Zoom gallery view. There should be a view selection at the top right of your Zoom window. So with that, I turn it over to Bay Fang and Mei Xu.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here today, and I see some familiar names in the guest list, which I'm happy about. It's really exciting. This is my first opportunity being with the Chinese American Museum, and I think what is really wonderful about it, and I've just learned about all the different events and the mission of the museum recently. But what I love is that I think the idea is to capture the Chinese American experience in all its forms. So that's ranging from first generation immigrants like Mei to people like myself who I was born here, to parents who immigrated from China via Taiwan, to people whose families have been in America for generations. And I think it's all captured in fascinating detail through your exhibitions and hopefully through events like this one. So I'm honored to be here today with a fascinating woman who I've also just, recently met, but actually have a lot in common with, and has just a really incredible background. So Mei was born in Hangzhou, China, and was trained from an early age to be a diplomat. She attended the Beijing Foreign Studies University, and then moved to the U.S., where she earned a master's degree in journalism from the University of Maryland in College Park. As we all know already, she created a multi-million-dollar corporation, Chesapeake Bay Candle, from scratch, and that story is worth talking for hours about. And her new mission, as David mentioned, is to elevate women-owned businesses with YesSheMay.com, which is an online platform where consumers can shop fashion, beauty, wellness, and home products designed for women by women. So I wanted to start our conversation by setting the stage a bit. It's really an exciting time to be having this discussion today with a new administration that's just coming in and off to a roaring start. What we know is, one of the issues that will be discussed quite a bit on a national level in the coming days is immigration. And I know that one of the things Mei has dedicated her career to is looking at the intersection between the immigrant experience, such as her own, and entrepreneurism, and linking the ideas of basically the desire and drive to embrace the unknown. So I think this is a great time to let Mei make an exciting announcement that will pave the way for the rest of our discussion.
Thank you, Bay, and thank you, David, and everyone on the board and working at the Chinese American Museum. I have been invited for so many times to visit, and every time the situation presented challenges, and then come COVID-19. So, I mean, it's now been almost a year since I wanted to visit. So I'm glad to have a virtual event. And obviously, what a great day. We started this conversation right after a brand new day for our nation and for our capital. And I couldn't imagine a better place to announce that I actually am publishing a book. The book is coming out. It's actually already on Amazon for pre-order. And it's really capturing my journey as an immigrant, creating a business from scratch. And the title is called Burn: How Grit, Innovation, and a Dash of Good Luck Ignited a Multi-million-dollar Success Story, American success story. As you can see, it's a mouthful, but the idea of burn obviously is playing a word with the fact that I built a business with candles. When Bay mentioned, I have spent a lot of time looking at what is in common between immigrants and entrepreneurs. One thing really stand out is that we always, as immigrants, have to abandon what's known, what's comfortable, and to take on what's risky and unknown in order to create a better future for ourselves. This sense of risk-taking and this sense of, in order to achieve something better, you have to give up something comfortable. It's a remarkable commonality. And that's probably one of the reasons why in this country, many more percentage of immigrants ended up starting a business. If you look at the likes of Google, we are using Zoom, for example, started by a Chinese immigrant that started the Zoom when not many people were thinking about using it for such a dynamic usage of multiple, sometimes hundreds of people using videos at the same time for collaborating around the world. So immigrants have one thing in common as entrepreneurs. But there's another thing that I find very interesting about these two groups of people is the fact that sometimes they started something because there's nothing for them. It's not that they are enjoying their life or enjoying their work. On the contrary, they have no choice. They are forced. Instead of giving up, they created something from nothing. And these two attributes, in my view, is also what particularly define Asian Americans and Chinese Americans. I was often saying to my children, in where I come from, because of such a large population, you were born a fighter. You're born for the oxygens. You're born for the opportunities that spread out to 1.3 billion people. So there's always a sense of competition. There's always a sense of, if you don't advocate for yourself, and if you don't push yourself harder, there's no opportunity that's going to be a pie from the sky. So immigrant stories oftentimes become entrepreneur stories. And I hope this is actually a great point for those of us that are immigrants, particularly those of us who's already here. The fact that we're invited to be celebrate the first event at Chinese American Museum is proof that we are trying to seek each other's support as well as build a stronger community together.
Yes, I couldn't agree with that more. So with that in mind, can you take us into your experience when you first came over from China and after having studied to be a diplomat representing the China to the US and learning English for that reason. What was it like when you came here? Were there cultural things that you didn't expect that you had to overcome, and how did you come up with the idea of launching this business?
Well, I came here in 1991, and it was already after I worked for a year in China. The circumstances such that after Tiananmen Square, a lot of the graduate for that year in 1989, which usually students graduate in 1989 July. So a lot of us graduating that year was sent away so that we're not in the major cities and causing more trouble for the government. I didn't quite like what I was doing. I was assigned to look after a warehouse for export of minerals, basically. And it was kind of a mindless job. If you think about it, every day you have 2 shifts of trucks that come to pick up what is essentially a bulk shipment of minerals. And then I would have a clipboard. I would check the first one, and then in the afternoon, I check the second one. I don't have to speak. I certainly don't have to speak English or apply my diplomatic training for anything. And that would be a 1-year assignment. And I just got very disappointed because I know for a language student, if you don't practice for a whole year, you pretty much will get very rusty with your language. So I resigned. Basically in 1989, when you resign, you basically will not be allowed to go back to the government track of becoming a diplomat again. And I decided to apply for university in the US. I was actually working for the World Bank as a translator when I was a student. So I really wanted to continue my work for the bank. I loved the fact that it was very multinational. I get to work with people of all culture, and I get to put my language, cultural, and social study background to help the local communities in China, sometimes even in parts of Asia for the World Bank project. So I applied to a school here. I think that was quite naive that I would graduate and then work for the bank. The culture shock, I would say, is more that things you can learn from school. Through my immersion program since the age of 12, from a language perspective, you couldn't possibly study a language this way in the sense of immersion, right? So we would spend half a day learning in English, American history, American art, Western literature. So it's a very good way to learn English. But no one would prepare me when I arrived and stayed with my friend at the World Bank to stay in a single family house on Massachusetts Avenue. You know where it is. It's near the embassies. And it was already late when we arrived. So they put me in one of their daughter's bedroom to sleep. And I just couldn't sleep because it's too quiet. I was so used to having stayed in a 1-room home with everyone on each side of 4, on the side, on the top, on the bottom, and it's always, very loud. With the carpet, it's just too quiet to me. And then it's so warm because it's in January, and I was very cold in China. There was no air conditioning, and you came to this house well appointed, like a museum, and it's so quiet. And the next day, you take, you open the fridge and you have this amazing, I remember even orange juice was a surprise to me. Just you can just have fresh orange juice storage in your refrigerator. Now remember, that was 1989. Nowadays, if you go to China, there will be surprises the other way around. There will be electronics that we haven't seen yet here. But that is the amount of change that has taken place. I think it's more little things like that shock me. And what really shocked me is the media. It's the ability to read things on so many different fronts, and to see people criticize governments or other people criticize those who criticize government. And you can call the names of the elected officers, you can get mad at them. That was very eye-opening to me, because I came from a country with a very closed media outlet with very censored point of view, just to see the variety and the boldness with those comments, that you do feel the idea of freedom of speech. And remember, I was a journalism student, so I was asked to read a lot of newspapers and follow a lot of channels. So it was probably the biggest shock for me.
Well, that's exactly what RFA's mission is. Actually, our Radio Free Asia is to inform people inside China and other countries in Asia where there isn't free press about what's happening around them. And actually, interestingly, when I was there, I learned that one of our biggest fans are actually the censors in China, who over the years were tasked with reading all of our media and trying to get rid of the parts that were unsavory for the government. So I wanted to draw on that because I know that you went from that to a job in where you were you had access to in New York, where you had access to a lot of the department stores. And I think one of the things that you say about the link between entrepreneurism and immigration is that immigrants not only sort of embrace the unknown, but in a way, because you're coming into a country with a fresh eye and not taking things for granted, you actually see a lot of the disconnects and a lot of the niches and gaps that might need to be filled. So I'm wondering if you can tell our audience about how you came to the idea of building this candle company.
Exactly. So first of all, I was not having access in a way that I was giving the choice. I was actually working for a company that was called US-China Industrial Exchange. It's an American company started by two women that are trained to become Chinese speakers from Yale. And they decided to start a business that helped China to import very highly advanced medical equipment to hospitals. There are two Americans. And they really also very much inspired me. But the job was about pushing papers. And I was separated from my then husband, David, who was working in DC. So I had nothing but time. I don't have a lot of friends then in New York. And the interesting thing is they put me in a hotel near where else but Bloomingdale's, the flagship store. And for someone who grew up without much material things, putting me there is like setting me free as a bird from a cage. So every day I would go to visit Bloomingdale's. And you are right, because for me, everything is new. It's almost like a study of trend and a study of society or human interest or fashion. And I quickly scan at the fashion floors, usually the first, second floor, and you have the most dominant designers of that moment was Donna Karan, Calvin Klein. And I love that minimalist, clean, fresh point of view, because I always more sort of, I personally like a more menswear style. It's less feminine, less floral, and it's cleaner. So the lack of all these free floral prints and skirts that are too girly makes me feel very good. And I can imagine a woman wearing this much more confident than before when they work. And then as I walked up the stairs, it gets more and more dated and boring until you went up to the 8th floor, which is the home floor. And it was the time of last century, because the furniture in the early 90s was very traditional. It's very ornate with some gilded touches, and the legs are very decorated. It's nothing contemporary. It's just very heavy. The floral prints are very tiny, like Laura Ashley, and it just reminded you of what you watched on your grandmother's, American grandmother's home, not my grandmother, but American grandmother's home. And I started to ask myself, why would a woman who wears a Calvin Klein or a Donna Karan on the street of New York with that very menswear design prints and minimalist sort of style would like to go home to this? It's just not adding up. Surely there is a contemporary lifestyle that she would rather go back to. And where is that lifestyle? So I started to see that it would be probably possible to address this, because I personally would have liked that kind of home. And if I wanted as a new immigrant, I just couldn't afford it yet, maybe someone else would. So this is where, after I talked about this almost every day with my husband, David, we basically said, I don't like my job. I also don't like the commute. And we also have a very strong sense that because I have so many friends who are trained as diplomats, end up working for the foreign trade business in the early 90s, when US and China are in their honeymoon stage and China's export exploded for the first time. There's so many opportunities. People would call us and want us to help them with different product and placement, but we never really like to be a trader. We always know that it's not our forte. For me, I have to do things that I feel can have a better match from an artistic or aesthetic perspective. I just feel a lot of the Chinese import was about low quality and low pricing. And that's not how I feel I should start my business. So after we talked to a few friends, we were giving a lot of samples. We wanted to be in the home business because I see the opportunity between fashion and home. There is a gap. And I think it's also much more easier to start on something that not yet become very competitive for everyone. So that's how we started. We started in 1994 after I basically resigned from my job and moved back to DC, and he resigned as well. Two immigrants without a mortgage and a baby and a dog decided that that's our first baby. And we just started with our own savings and with a lot of samples and ideas from our friends. That's how we launched our first business.
I love that. And in the course of building it, I know you started with sourcing materials and I think having your sister build a factory for you in China, right?
Yeah.
And eventually you started you built a factory here. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so what was the thinking behind that? What was the importance for you about bringing the operations here?
So this touches on one of my favorite topic, which is the creative innovation in product and the relationship with manufacturing. When people talk about China and the fact it becomes the world's factory, we always think they were able to do that because of that labor cost and because of their lower prices, which I believe it's how they get started. But what people fail to understand is that because they were so big of a labor force, they were able to quickly get into so many different industries, from electronics to fashion to furniture, nowadays to advanced manufacturing. And I remember at one of the Fortune Summit in China when Tim Cook from Apple was speaking about why is it very difficult for Apple to move their iPhone manufacturing out of China. He said that it's not cost. It's the fact that the Chinese workers are so good at learning new things that whenever they have to learn a new way of assembling something, it's possible to get that training and that level of consistency that is very hard to repeat in another country. So going back to manufacturing, I actually had a lot of problem, unlike Tim, who has a huge volume and who has to spread his iPhone production to many factories. My opposite problem was that I have great design, but I have very small orders. So that's a problem with China, is that they are very good at working with the Walmarts and Apples of the world. But when you are a designer and you want to do something very small batch, that's very hard. And I knock on doors and people basically say, are you kidding me? You're going to do 40 different items with one container? This is never going to work because my machine, the minimum is XYZ. They're not incentivized. And that's where I asked my sister, who's actually a trained computer scientist, to work with me, and she did. And until today, I would say this is probably what made it possible for me to sort of start from scratch, get into an industry that I didn't know, because what fueled that growth is innovation, is great ideas that other people may not see as vital, but it's vital because that was at the moment where fragrance industry in the home business was on the rise, and not many of the product was made in China. And my ability to design them in the US, even the fragrance was designed in the US. I bought the oils in the US, ship it back to China so that they can hand pour them into beautiful candles. It's something remarkable. I basically occupy the space that not many US companies can do, or the Chinese company. They don't understand the whole fragrance aspect. They do a lot of candles that looks good, but there's nothing that is consumable. So once you buy them, you put them there, you don't burn them. For fragrance candles, people want to burn them. And once they burn them, they want to buy more fragrances, or they give it to their friends, or American housewives, they like to buy candles so that when they finish cleaning up their house, they put the candle on as a finishing touch. When their kids come home, they smell the wonderful cinnamon or the wonderful cookies or jasmine. It's a sense of clean. It's a sense of welcoming. So I understand that because I live here and I'm a student of culture and a student of fashion and social movement. So, but I can't explain what I want to do with factory owners who has no patience or who cannot see beyond each order's profitability to agree with me. So that's how we started in China. And as the 2008 financial crisis hit, China's labor cost is increasing continuously. They were not letting up. And the US consumer giants like Bed Bath & Beyond and Target of the world asked me to give them discount. By then, I was already working with the best retailers. And they say, our business is slow, give us a discount. So I said, on the same hand, I have had increases. On the other side, my retailers asking me for discount. On top of that, candle is a very seasonal business. Imagine pumpkin, right? It's only popular after August, mostly September, then all the way to Thanksgiving. As soon as Halloween actually arrives, it starts to drop. And then something else will pick up, such as Christmas tree fragrance or apple. Imagine if I chase inventory from Asia, it takes me 8 weeks. So I'm always either bringing too much or not enough. But if I manufacture in the US, it's about 2 weeks, right? So the financial case started to be made. You can make that case that finally, maybe it makes more sense now to manufacture in the US. So that's what I did against all odds. We were the first manufacturing facility opening in Maryland in 2 decades. They didn't even have a procedure to give you so that you can have all the permits. When we went to Anne Arundel County, which is outside of Baltimore, to ask for a permit, the permit officer basically threw me 3 books. One is for schools, one is for hospitals, one is for restaurant. And he said, if you can't comply with all these 3 codes, we'll give you a permit because there's no permit for factories. So it was a very interesting time because we're now ready for manufacturing. You and I yesterday talked briefly about how I have problems with government agencies or in general, government agencies that think about they only want high-tech manufacturing or high-tech jobs. They don't want any manufacturing jobs because it's not sexy, it's not new age, it's not technological driven. And to me, it's very arrogant to think that way because we have 300 million people in this country and not everyone is fit to do a technology job. There are many people laid off outside of Baltimore. 5 1 in every 5 people in Baltimore is not working right now because they have been working in warehouses and in factories, and those jobs are not there for them. And they are not well trained for another job yet. So my business attracted so many people, and we were able to really increase the quality of our brand, and our turnaround is so much better. We grow the business after we finally settle in the Maryland area, and you know, it was something that it's a turnaround story for our brand. Had we not done that, I think the 2008 crisis would have just wiped our business out.
So on that note, I was wondering if you had any message. I'm sure you could pass it directly, but for the new administration, is there anything that you you know, would want to bring to their attention, either on the jobs front or on the, actually, a friend of mine, speaking of prominent Chinese Americans, a friend of mine was just appointed the new U.S. Trade Representative, Catherine Tai. So
She is
yeah. So
yes, I'm so proud of
she's not only the first Chinese American, but the first person of color to occupy that position, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But you know, is there anything that you think would be important as they think about economic policies moving forward that you know, from your experience?
I think we have been mentioning about creative economy before we had all this mess with our government in the last couple of years. There was a lot of buzz about the creative economy. What does a creative economy look like? It's an economy that is a little bit more enabling people that write, people that paint, people that have arts and crafts, you know, mindset, and people with a technology background. Hopefully can coexist in an economy, be it if you have designers that design fashion, but using more sustainable fabric versus the ones that are extremely polluting and taking a lot of water. Or if you are an artist that is going to hand paint potteries, again, using more sustainable paint or materials, and handmade, but also customized. And the whole idea of customization cannot be happening in a faraway land with such a long term of wait and then using air shipment with all this waste. It's better to be done closer to the consumers. So for me, the idea is how can we enable and nurture a creative economy, which is also a creative manufacturing ecosystem, that we can be leading again in areas that may look very mundane. I was joking, people look at underwears and candles and they say, why do we want that business? Those shops, they can stay in Mexico, they can stay in China. And I disagree with that. I think when you put creativity and design next to manufacturing, that's where the magic happens. If you don't understand the process, how the material goes from 1 to Z, you would never be able to innovate or do it better. You would only make the packaging changes. You would not be able to make the shoes feel different or the underwear more comfortable or more sustainable, that we don't, you know, in doing our fabric printing, polluting again. So I was joking with with people. Sometimes I say, you know, our toothpaste, for example, we've used the toothpaste, the same one for 50 years. Who said the toothpaste has to look like this and taste like this? Nobody. But because we haven't really prioritized how important it is for our daily life, it's just sitting there, not inspiring, not exciting. None of our kids would look forward to the first thing, brushing their teeth. So creative innovator can think about ways to make it something that can count when you brush. Oh, you need to count for 2 minutes, or the toothpaste can be personalized in the flavor so that you can choose different toothpaste when you are in different mood for the kids. So I just look at this future of making things, everyday things, better. And that's where I see that we do have to give this creative economy some room. And in doing so, we also will inspire our children to be proud of what they can do, not just that they have to be a scientist or a computer scientist, that they can be the talent they want to be and still be making a good living and be a meaningful part of society.
I think that's a really important and inspiring message, especially coming right now in the middle of a pandemic. Hopefully an end is in sight, but I know we were talking about this before, about how, you know, when you started, it was a time of great disruption, right? Just during the first Gulf War. And it seems like right now it's also a time when retail is completely disrupted and people have to find a new way forward. So I think that is a really important and inspiring message. So I wanted to address some of the questions that have come in, which I have as well. The idea of you know, being an Asian woman, and you know, we can address this separately or together, but you know, I think people really see you as a role model, and I think you know, a couple of questions that have come in are, you know, did you face discrimination? I mean, I know myself, as you know, both as a war correspondent, and then, you know, in some ways even more so, representing the administration overseas. It seemed like people were not expecting to see an Asian woman in a leadership position in the U.S. government. How did you overcome that, and what were some of the difficulties that you faced?
I do feel this is a very good question. I don't want to undermine any of the challenges. It's very challenging. That's why I do feel we have to have more grits. We have to have more sort of sense that we just can't give up. Whether or not I have discriminations as a woman, as a Chinese American, I can tell you, if you think about it, it's always there. I happen to say that there are times when I look like I was really not addressing it, but I just don't want to let it be the main concern I have. For example, as a sitting CEO, usually in my position at Chesapeake Bay Candle and being sold to one of the world's leading consumer conglomerate, if I'm a man or if I'm not an Asian woman, I will be offered a lot of board seats. And the fact that the first thing they ask me, and this is a very self-defeating question, and usually they're very large companies for board seat, they would say, the first qualification is that you have to be able to already run a $1 billion company. And I look at them, I said, so you're saying, if I haven't run a $1 billion company, I cannot be on the board of this $1.3 billion company? And they say, yes. And I said, well, how many $1 billion self-made company that are owned by a CEO that is a woman do you have? They can't answer the question. How many of them have manufacturing experience? They can't answer. How many of them actually speak different languages because she grew up in a different culture? And you know, it's just, to me, it's very sad. So in Europe, as you know, the public board is demanding that there's a quota, but it's not happening in the US yet. And I also found out that sometimes they put you as a symbol, right? I was on a board once. I was checking all the boxes for them as a female, a young female, and a minority. So I checked 3 boxes, but all the major decisions was made during their golf, outing, and I don't play golf. So I feel every time when they make the decisions, I was already pretty much just for a show. So it doesn't make me feel very comfortable. Eventually, I decided to resign from that board. So discrimination is still one of the biggest challenges for Asian American, I would say, as well as sometimes a lack of a way for us to stand up against it in person. Now, my husband will tell you, I'm the kind of person, if someone discriminates against me in public, I will make them feel very uncomfortable. I'm the smallest person, but I have the biggest voices. It doesn't even matter if it's in here or in Italy where he's from. I would make sure they feel very uncomfortable. And that's my sort of mechanism to make sure that my children and my children's children will see that I stand up for myself. It doesn't matter if I'm waiting for the checkout and someone cut in front of me, because obviously I'm so small, they could ignore. I stand there and say, excuse me, I'm sorry, this is a line. Oh, I didn't know you were standing there. I said, I know, I'm very small, but I am standing here. So I hope that you agree with me. Sometimes you have to have a sense of humor. When I first came here, Chinese Americans from China, at least, were not supposed to be shopping at any major nice stores. So the moment I walk in, people speak Japanese to me. And they will ask me if I'm Japanese. I say, sure, my dad is a sushi chef. And then a few years later, they will ask me if I'm a Korean American. I said, yeah, I really am a Korean American. I love kimchi a lot. Do you like kimchi too? I just made fun of the situation because I feel people wants to pigeonhole you. Why not have fun with them and let them feel how silly it is to just, I mean, do you ever ask someone, I'm sure you come from Miami, or I'm sure you come from Connecticut? You don't. So my reaction to this is that it's not going to go away, not with the last president telling us about all the things that he has told. So what has happened in the last 4 years probably take me back into the early 90s when I was here. I feel we went back probably 2 decades. And similarly for women, right? So women business probably has the most negative impact during the pandemic. We have to take care of children. Sometimes we have to take care of parents. And we are going to be having to make up all the time and the position that we lost over the last year. No doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with the Asian woman stereotype of being, the agreeable one who doesn't rock the boat and all of that, I think it is important, like you said, to make sure that that we have a voice and we use it. Is there any other, are there any other words of advice you have for, either overcoming stereotypes or for women entrepreneurs, strategies for countering?
I have a good story for you. This is going to be a little bit long, but for those of you who's interested, I worked with a very large company as a customer for a very long time, and the company is called Target. You probably shopped there. I did many times. I would say I've been to Target headquarters probably almost 100 times. So it's a very important customer for me. In the very beginning, when my business was taking off, I was so sort of overcome by the fact that it was such an overnight success. And whenever they asked me for something like, can we get this order earlier or can we get more samples? The Asian women side of me, which is always trying to be agreeable, to be a team player, to be a nice person, would always prevent me from being honest and transparent and say, no, this is not possible because I'm already having lower margins here. And you're asking me to airship something, or no, the sample cannot be made for you because you forgot to order it earlier. It's very confrontational, and our upbringing is such that you just cannot do business with such a strong personality. And then I realized they think I was lying. They think I was not come forward with the truth. And I was very surprised that such a strong word called lying is actually used with my behavior. And I started to see that we are all in this world, in this business together. And if I started to withhold information because it's not comfortable, because it's not convenient, then instead of making a solution, we're delaying that solution until it's probably too late for both of us to do it in a very sound way. So it's no longer about being conforming or being agreeable. It's about being a partner and being able to say, I have a problem with this request, but here are the solutions. Let's see what are the solutions that you and I can live with that is a win-win. So to me, this is also a very big moment for my personal growth, because that's the moment where I turned this little bit of, I'm so sorry for myself, I'm a small business and they're a big company, whatever they say, I have to agree, otherwise I will lose them. That sense of insecurity and self-pitying is gone. Instead, I have adopted a very strong growth mentality that we are equals. Without me, they couldn't get the product they want. Their shelf will be empty, their consumers will be disappointed. So we're equals. And you have to feel empowered in order to really become a partner. And you can't let them feel that you are, just because you're smaller, you're inferior than them. That's not going to work. So I hope that this kind of lesson that I learned, which is in the book, by the way, I've never really mentioned it in public because it takes a lot of time to talk about the incidences, will illustrate how even a very, I grew up until I was 23 in China to come here. There was a lot of stubborn sort of attitude that is hard to change. But those moments hit me. And I hope that those of us who's starting a business now will not ever doubt that their relevance or their position in life. It's not about how important other people are. It's how you can position yourselves and really have a good sort of understanding that agreeing attitude is not going to get you very far. Rather, it's actually going to stop you from growing because you're not exploring this as a common problem. I hope this little thing demonstrate. And I think a lot of times it still come out. I sometimes have a problem setting boundaries with my customers. And I could have the same problem with setting boundaries with my children, right? So people don't do things in one place in their life. They can do it in many places in their life. And I learned to look at things in a more sort of objective way. And I think that we have to sometimes unlearn our experiences and unlearn some of our upbringing to be able to grow as a person. And I always feel one of my advantages, I'm very curious. I spend a lot of time with young people. Corny, who's here with me, she's over 20, but she's not even the youngest in my company. I love working with young people because they are like a mirror. They make me feel that I have a lot to learn.
So we're nearing the end of our time here. So if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand and I'll unmute you. But I do wonder, I mean, if there aren't any coming in right now, given that, like we were talking about how, the time right now during the pandemic is really similar to your experience when you were first starting out and when it was hard to find a job and recent graduates were struggling to find their place in the world. How would you, what kind of advice would you give to a young person now who might be, graduating from school and looking for an opportunity? I mean, I loved, your stories, which again would take another panel, I think, but about, all the experimentation and all the work and struggle that led to your ending up with a candle idea and growing it. So what would be your advice to a young person today?
I actually think it's a great time to start a business because of the disruption. Just in retail alone, we're looking at about 9,000 or 95,000 businesses closing. Most of them are in retail, in brick and mortar, but also in hotels, in travel, in service-related businesses. And a lot of them, or because they are not yet online, they have not yet established that business model. So young people with great education, but haven't been able to find a job. This is the chance. Flower arrangement. I have seen new ways of doing all kinds of businesses that we never thought was possible. So what happened just in retail alone, the change from bricks to clicks took place. What happened in the last year would have cost us 6 to 10 years to happen in a regular time. but because of the pandemic, it's really accelerating. So disruption is also everywhere in other industries that in a way that we're talking about education online. I see huge opportunity for continued online learning, not just because people, some people have to do it, but because people realize that there is certain individualistic education that can be very effective. My son has always been taking Chinese online because his school doesn't offer Chinese, but they find a good way to share, the teacher and him find a good way to use Zoom to share a Chinese movie together and then ask questions to each other. So I do feel there are several particularly important areas in education, in arts. I've attended so many art shows online for the first time. You could buy art, you could talk about art in a Zoom environment. So all these are great, even therapy. Who would have thought that instead of driving for 2 hours and sit down for 30 minutes with your therapist, now you could just go on a Zoom. And it could also make it more affordable to people that want that kind of service, but not available. So as you probably know, I'm also an investor. I'm very active in the investment world. I probably have 2 or 3, 4 proposals each week that I'm looking at. And a lot of those new ideas are tremendously exciting because the old way that has been stopping them is no longer a big obstacle. And there are so many things that could emerge with new thinking, and people are more ready for that.
Had to unmute one of the no, that's great. There is one last question about the wealth gap, and I think you've spoken about how during the pandemic a lot of the virtual interactions can actually be equalizing and democratizing, but there is still this increasing issue in our country of the wealth gap. Is there anything that you would like to speak to about that?
My husband is an economist, and I think he would better be in a way to answer this. I do agree with him. He's a liberal-minded economist in the sense that he believed that the extreme wealth come from the tax bracket, but it also comes from lack of education, lack of investment in education. And I think as a country, one of the few large, well-developed countries without a very well developed public university education system, that's one of the first places I would go to really make sure that everyone who wants a university education could have one. The second, I would say, is something I really look to European countries such as Germany, Italy, and France, which is the apprenticeship program, which has been very important for them to have people with a profession. They don't have to go to university, but they have to commit to 2 years paid by industry to be in a mechanic engineering for a car repair, or to become a chef, or become a tailor. These are jobs that can increase the pay, have a job security, in a way that we don't have now. But as an entrepreneur, I wish that also a percentage of those tax income will go to enable small and startup companies to have capital. That's one of the biggest problems for small women-owned businesses, is the access to capital. And it's not just a 0.1 versus 90 in income. It's also in businesses, right? Your 1% of the business really have such a free cash to grow their business, and the majority of the business never have been offered that opportunity. So.
Thank you so much, Mei. This has been an exhilarating conversation. And please, everyone, buy the book.
Yeah, we've created a little graphic here. This is Mei's book.
Thank you very much. There's a candle, so you couldn't miss it. And I'm very excited because this is the first time we actually announced it. In it, there's a lot of stories of the kind that I talk about, and it really focuses on also how I view the entrepreneurship journey as well as innovative, driven businesses. So I look forward to having another opportunity to be here and visit in person, David. That is something I wanted to do as soon as I get a vaccine and you're open for business.
That's right. We should combine the museum with as a vaccine location.
That will work. I'll be there.
Yeah, it's a good model. Well, yeah, thank you so much. And, thank you for your insight and candor. And also thank you to Ting and James Xu of Evergreen Enterprises for sponsoring this series. You've made this possible. Everybody that has attended or registered for this event should receive a follow-up email from us, from the museum, with a link to the recording of this event. And also we will include the direct link for pre-ordering Mei's book. So you could pre-order it right now, and then I guess you'll get it close to March 23rd.
Excellent. And I look forward to hearing from the audience. I think that, it's always good to have some kind of conversation going. So I hope that I can join you for your next event, and look forward to meeting talents like Bei and David.
Yeah, we would love that. And then Mei, what can people find at your Yes She May website?
Oh, thank you so much. So Yes She May is a platform for women founders and women designers around the world. I really want to really put forward this platform so that instead of just helping them from behind, I want to showcase their talent and their creativity. The idea is that a lot of platforms such as Amazon, it's like finding needles in a haystack. So my team and I travel the world and we look for products that really stand out from their solution perspective, but also quality. So we're very careful. We have about 60 brands. We're onboarding more. And if you truly want to follow some of those, particularly a lot of them are international, we probably have 12 countries already in 5 different continents. So it's rapidly expanding. And I also interview them. So a lot of them are very interesting, particularly for those who's entrepreneur minded. You find a lot of inspirations from their story as well. And I'm very proud of them.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Well, as I mentioned, this event has been recorded and should be available probably in the next day, either by email to the registrants, but also it'll be on our website and our YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about the Chinese American Museum, or if you'd like to support great content like this, please visit us at our website here on the screen. And please check out Mei's website, yesshemay.com. And thank you, Bei. We really enjoyed working with both of you, and I think we need to schedule a part 2.
Well, we have a lot of great Chinese American representations now in Washington. I can't wait for you to interview them and to meet them. It's
terrific.
One thing to see them on the TV screen. It's another to really hear their stories and how their life has taken them so far. It's very inspirational.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, and both of you have a terrific day. And thank you to everybody that has attended. And we hope to see everybody soon, in person.
In person. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take
David.
care.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.